I thought marrying into money meant security. But on the night of our wedding, I overheard my new mother-in-law whisper to a lawyer, "She'll sign it. She doesn't need to know what it means." 2 weeks later, I was locked out of every joint account. No warnings, no explanations. Just a polished smile at breakfast and a cold silence at night. That's when I realized this wasn't a family. It was a boardroom. And I'd just been outvoted. But they didn't know one thing. I don't play fair. I play for the long game. And I never, ever lose. When I first stepped into the Ashcroft estate as Claire Ashcroft, I thought I had won the kind of love story that only came in hardcovers with glossy covers and glittering rings. Nathaniel, with his quiet strength and old money charm, had asked me to marry him in Paris under falling snow. He was the heir to one of the oldest real estate dynasties on the East Coast. I was a creative director at a small but rising beauty startup. It felt like balance, art and empire, heart and legacy. It felt like destiny. The wedding was out of a curated Pinterest dream. Cathedral ceilings, champagne towers, a Vera Wang gown that felt stitched from air. His mother, Catherine, welcomed me with a smile that never touched her eyes, and his sister, Vivian, gave me a diamond bracelet and a laugh that lingered a second too long whenever I mispronounced an aristocratic name at dinner. But I ignored it all. I told myself I was just adjusting to a world I hadn't grown up in. These people weren't cruel, just refined. I watched Catherine oversee every detail of our honeymoon itinerary as if she were planning a corporate merger, not her son's post-nuptial bliss. Nathaniel laughed it off. "That's just how she shows love," he'd said, brushing a curl behind my ear. I believed him. Until the night of our wedding. I couldn't sleep. Too much champagne. Too many nerves. I left the bedroom to get a glass of water and found myself walking past Catherine's study. Her voice stopped me cold. "She'll sign it. She doesn't need to know what it means," she said crisply, as if confirming a lunch reservation. A man, someone with the clipped tone of a lawyer, replied, "That won't hold if she challenges." "She won't," Catherine cut in. "Claire's obedient, grateful. She won't risk Nathaniel's disapproval." I stood there, barefoot in a silk robe that suddenly felt like armor made of paper. I told myself I must have misunderstood. They couldn't be talking about me. Not on my wedding night. The next morning, everything was normal. Too normal. Nathaniel kissed my temple, brought me coffee in bed. Catherine had croissants flown in from Paris. Vivian complimented my robe with that same glassy smile. It was a performance I wasn't trained for, but I played my part. 2 weeks later, the papers arrived. "Just something to finalize asset protections," Nathaniel explained, flipping through the thick legal packet. "Prenuptials are outdated. This just ensures everything stays tidy for the board." He said it with such casual confidence, as if this were a normal part of marriage. I asked if I should have my lawyer look at it. He smiled almost pityingly. "Claire, it's just a formality." So I signed. Not because I didn't suspect, but because I was still trying to be the woman they wanted. Polished, trusting, low maintenance. A week later, my access to our joint accounts disappeared. At first, I thought it was a glitch. I emailed the bank. No response. I asked Nathaniel. He frowned, said he'd look into it, but nothing changed. Then came the dinner parties I wasn't invited to, the meetings I wasn't told about. I started to feel like a well-dressed ghost in the Ashcroft household, present but never consulted, alive but not seen. When I confronted Nathaniel, he looked genuinely confused. "It's just business, Claire. These things are complicated. Don't stress over what you don't need to worry about." And that's when I started listening more carefully, reading between sentences, watching Catherine and Vivian exchange glances during brunch, watching the way staff deferred to them but rarely met my eyes. The Ashcroft home was a palace, but I was never queen, just another guest in a rotating roster of disposable accessories. It all snapped into focus the morning I was looking for our marriage certificate and found a revised will instead. It wasn't addressed to me, but it sat openly on Nathaniel's desk as if daring me to find it. The language was clinical, but the intent clear. In the event of divorce, all holdings would pass directly to the successor spouse, not the current wife, me. I sat there for a full minute, the morning sun slicing across the mahogany desk, the words bleeding into my skin. Successor spouse. Not even a name. That's when I knew this wasn't love. It wasn't even betrayal. It was policy. I wasn't Claire. The woman Nathaniel chose, I was Claire, the placeholder, and policy could be changed. I stopped asking questions the day I read the will. I stopped flinching at their backhanded comments. I smiled more, laughed when I needed to, dressed as they preferred, played the part of the perfect, grateful wife. Let them believe I was shrinking, adjusting, folding into the silk-lined cage they built for me. But inside, something uncurled, a slow, deliberate ignition, and I didn't plan to burn quietly. I told Nathaniel I wanted to keep busy, that married life had left me adrift and I missed the thrill of my old job. He didn't hesitate. Of course, he said, just don't exhaust yourself. I gave him a sweet nod and kissed his cheek. He didn't even ask what company I was going back to. I wasn't going back. I was starting over. The LLC was registered under the name of a college roommate I hadn't spoken to in years, someone who owed me a favor and liked secrets. The brand was called Ember Skin, a minimalist, no BS skincare line rooted in recovery, simplicity, and control. I didn't want glamour. I wanted fire. At night, while Nathaniel hosted dinners or attended charity events with his mother and sister, I sat at my desk researching fulfillment centers and quietly paying content creators on TikTok with micro followings to unbox products they hadn't even tried. The illusion of popularity was sometimes enough to create the real thing. Within 3 months, we'd hit 5 figures in monthly revenue. Every step I took was invisible to them, like I was erasing my own footprints as I walked. But this wasn't just about independence. It wasn't just about escape. I wanted to know how deep the rot went. That's when I reached out to Logan. We hadn't spoken in nearly 6 years. He was once the golden boy at a hedge fund before a scandal involving insider trading knocked him out of Wall Street. I knew he didn't do it, and I knew he knew how to read financial ghosts. He showed up at a quiet cafe in Soho wearing dark sunglasses and the same watch I remembered from grad school. "I thought you married into a trust fund," he said, sipping his espresso. "What the hell are you doing calling me?" "I need you to help me find something," I said, "something no one wants me to see." He listened without interrupting as I laid out the basics. Not the betrayal, not the personal, just the structure, the loopholes, the way money disappeared inside the Ashcroft empire without explanation. Logan didn't blink. "Offshores?" "I think so." "Names?" "Vivian, and possibly Catherine." He chuckled. Of course the women, always underestimated. 3 weeks later, he had names, accounts, flows, password patterns. I gave him old email headers, half-burned documents from Nathaniel's printer, even handwriting samples. Logan decrypted everything. One name surfaced again and again, Goldvale Holdings, an offshore entity registered in Malta, linked to a trust tied to Vivian's maiden name, and a string of shell companies parked across 3 continents. They were bleeding the Ashcroft assets dry under the guise of legal restructuring, and no one, not even Nathaniel, apparently, was paying attention. I didn't confront them. I didn't scream. I used what they'd taught me. I started recruiting. Marina was an intern in the legal department, quiet but brilliant, who idolized Catherine. I invited her for lunch and offered her a consulting gig on a personal business matter. She accepted, eager and wide-eyed. I fed her tasks piece by piece, nothing illegal, nothing traceable, but enough to build a bridge of documentation no one saw coming. I wanted to see everything before I destroyed anything. By the time summer waned into fall, I'd acquired 2 commercial buildings in upstate New York, properties Nathaniel's company had sold as underperforming assets. They were undervalued on paper, but located in an area undergoing a quiet tech migration. In less than 6 months, their value would triple. I bought them through a third party under a shell company no one could trace to me. It felt like chess. Every move silent, calculated. Every capture made without drama. Then came the night Catherine cornered me. The dinner was for a philanthropic foundation. I wore a backless navy dress she'd picked for me, her version of a leash. The wine was excellent, the lighting soft. She pulled me into the solarium while Nathaniel took a call. Her voice was velvet-wrapped steel. "You've been busy." I tilted my head, feigning innocence. "I've been trying to stay useful." She stepped closer, heels silent on the marble. "We'll be restructuring. Things will shift. You should know, Claire. We don't keep things that aren't assets, and we don't tolerate liabilities." I smiled, not blinking. "I understand. It's important to trim the excess." Her eyes narrowed. "I'm not afraid of you, Catherine. You should be." I sipped my champagne, the bubbles catching the chandelier light. "Then you should have buried me deeper." She didn't respond, just walked away, slow and deliberate. She thought she'd rattled me, but she had no idea how close I was to pulling the first thread. The first time I tasted real power, it wasn't during a boardroom speech or a press conference. It was when I saw my words printed on glossy magazine paper, words they didn't know were mine. The article was a piece on emerging female voices in finance, penned anonymously. My quote sat dead center of the layout, framed in bold ink. "Women don't need a seat at the table. They need the whole game board." I watched as readers speculated who said it. Praise poured in, reposts, DMs sent to the editorial team asking for her name. She didn't have one. She had a purpose. Within a week, I received a private message from the CEO of Argeno Holdings, one of the fastest-growing hedge firms in the Northeast. He said he was intrigued, that he wanted the mind behind that sentence on his upcoming podcast, anonymously. No face, no name, just a voice. I agreed. I sat in a private sound booth, modulator on, speaking into a microphone about long-term asset reconfiguration, female economic silence, and the danger of inherited money devoid of earned respect. I spoke with calm precision. Confidence is quiet when it's earned. The clip went viral among niche investment circles. No one knew it was me, but one person suspected. Marina texted me that week. "Catherine asked if I think you're up to something. I said no, but she doesn't believe me." Good. It meant they were starting to feel the shift in gravity. I'd been moving quietly in the background, applying pressure in places they thought were untouchable. I advised a rival firm to hold off on a key land deal until Q3. When the Ashcroft board scrambled to sell a property they'd mismanaged for years, the buyer waiting on the other end of the call was my company. Through a veil of shell corporations, NDAs, and a false name, of course. They sold it for less than half its projected Q4 valuation. I didn't gloat. I reinvested. It wasn't revenge. It was the blueprint for dismantling a dynasty. Then Nathaniel found out. I don't know how. Maybe he finally started paying attention. Maybe Catherine left a trail. Maybe Vivian got careless. All I know is that I came home one evening to find him sitting in the dark, the only light coming from the fireplace, a folder open on the coffee table. Inside were screenshots, tax records, a property ledger with one name circled, my alias. "Claire," he said, voice low, brittle. "What the hell have you done?" I sat across from him, set my keys down gently. "Are you asking as my husband or as Ashcroft's heir?" His jaw tightened. "You've been gutting my company, undermining the board, using our resources, our connections, against us." "Not against you," I corrected. "Against the machine that tried to erase me." He stood, pacing now. "You forged identities. You could go to prison." "No," I said. "I hired lawyers smarter than yours, and I used documents you and your family tried to bury. If anyone's going to prison, Nathaniel, it won't be me." His eyes searched mine like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. I didn't either. Not fully. The woman I'd become didn't ask for permission. She didn't cry behind closed doors. She didn't wait for an invitation to protect herself. He tried to take control legally the next day, filed an emergency motion to freeze personal and business assets tied to my name. Too late. My new legal team filed a countersuit with evidence of fraudulent asset transfers made by Vivian, disguised as board-approved write-offs. Alongside that, we attached a sealed recording. Catherine's voice clipped and clear from our wedding week. "She'll sign it. She doesn't need to know what it means." The same line I'd heard in the hallway, now admissible. The moment it leaked to the board, the cracks became fractures. But the worst came when Vivian retaliated. She went to the press, leaked photos of me and Logan at a cafe, cropped just close enough to look like an affair. No context, no story, just scandal bait. By the time I saw the headlines, Ashcroft heir's wife secretly meeting former Wall Street outcast, I'd already had Marina release the second recording. This time, it wasn't mine, it was Catherine, instructing Marina to plant evidence of infidelity in case things ever got messy. It wasn't just damage control, it was nuclear war. That night, Nathaniel barged into the study, face flushed, veins taut in his neck. He slammed the door so hard it rattled the chandelier. "You set her up," he barked. "You ruined everything." I didn't stand, didn't flinch. She set herself up. I just stopped cleaning up her mess. He looked at me like a man staring down the barrel of a gun he once owned. "Do you even love me?" he asked, voice cracking. I thought about that question more than I wanted to. Then I gave him the truth. "I love the version of you who hadn't let your mother hollow you out." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Mom says she made you this way." I didn't argue, because she did, and that would be her biggest regret. The press conference wasn't held at a hotel ballroom or some cold boardroom downtown. It took place in a converted art gallery, white brick walls, exposed beams, plants cascading from skylights. No logos, no corporate banners, just a single microphone and one chair, mine. I wore no jewelry, no designer tags, just a deep green dress, the same shade as the first serum bottle I ever designed for Ember's skin. The brand that had gone from anonymous to iconic in less than 12 months. The one that Forbes had recently called the silent disruptor of the beauty industry. And until today, no one knew the face behind it. Until now. I stepped up to the mic and let the silence build. "My name is Claire Ashcroft," I began. "And for the last year, I've been called many things. Heiress, liar, opportunist, ghost. But today I'm going to tell you the only label that's ever mattered to me. Survivor." The room held its breath. I am the founder and sole owner of Ember Skin. We've surpassed $10 million in revenue this past fiscal year. I started it with 2 credit cards, a garage, and no access to my husband's bank accounts. A few gasps followed. One woman near the front covered her mouth. I continued. Slow and steady. I built it in secret, because I had to, because I was never supposed to have something of my own, because in the world I married into, a wife is not a partner. She's an asset, or a liability, but never a player. I let the silence hang before delivering the final blow. I didn't lose a husband, I found myself, and I will never trade that discovery for anyone's name ever again. The room erupted. Flashbulbs, shouts, requests for exclusives. I ended it with one final statement. I was donating a large portion of my personal fortune to a new foundation, the Claire Initiative, a legal support network for women financially manipulated within marriages, denied resources, silenced through contracts they didn't fully understand. That afternoon, as the livestream made its rounds, the Ashcroft name began to unravel. The Financial Crimes Division opened an investigation into Ashcroft Holdings. The offshores, the property dumps, the paper trails I had helped make visible. They triggered a chain reaction the family had no way of containing. Catherine was forced to step down from all executive duties within 48 hours. Vivian's shell companies were suspended pending legal review, and Nathaniel, he filed for divorce. He didn't even call. The papers arrived by courier, polite, professional, impersonal, as if we'd never kissed under Parisian snowfall or promised anything under cathedral light. I signed them that same evening, no hesitation, no regret. Letting go had never felt so much like coming home to myself. The news moved fast. Stock prices plummeted. Board members resigned. Investors demanded audits. Lawsuits brewed in silence, ready to roar. Meanwhile, I disappeared. I turned down every TV segment, declined every book deal, ignored calls from old colleagues and curious friends. I bought a modest home in a quiet city no one expected, a place with foggy mornings and bookstores on every corner, a place where no one cared what last name I used. At the farmer's market, I was just Claire. At the cafe, I was the woman who always reads alone. It was the kind of anonymity that once terrified me. Now it felt like armor. I didn't vanish because I was afraid. I vanished because I had already said everything I needed to say. The rest was for the world to figure out on its own. Then, one Sunday afternoon, as I was browsing secondhand novels at a small bookshop, a girl around 10 years old tugged at her mother's sleeve and pointed at me. "Mom, is that the woman from the TV? The one who made her own company and didn't cry when they were mean?" The mother gave me an apologetic look. I smiled gently. The girl looked up at me, wide-eyed. "Is it you?" I crouched to her level, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "No, sweetie," I said softly. "I'm just someone who learned not to let anyone else write her story." Her smile lit up the aisle like a floodlight, and in that moment I didn't feel powerful. I felt free. Victory tastes strange when it comes after everything you once loved has rotted away. The silence I had fought so hard for became its own prison, echoing too loudly. Ember Skin was everywhere. Billboards, beauty vlogs, even Vogue did a full-page spread on the face behind the flame. Except, ironically, they still didn't know it was mine. I watched from a distance as the world applauded a version of me I no longer fully recognized. At first, I thought I was content, detached but powerful, a shadow that moved markets. But slowly, something darker seeped in. I didn't trust easily. I didn't believe praise when it came. I had learned too well how quickly admiration turned to manipulation. I kept people at arm's length, and even then, only when necessary. When the offers came, they came like storms. Venture capitalists, international conglomerates, media giants, all flashing numbers that made my breath catch. 80 million. That was the number for full acquisition. With one clause, I stepped down. "Creative control doesn't scale," one investor had said, smiling as though he were doing me a favor. "You've proven your point. Now let it grow." I stared at the contract for days. It sat on my desk like a dare. The money didn't tempt me, but the freedom it could buy, that was harder to ignore. Logan, my one-time ally, called me one evening. His voice was tight. "They're leaning on me," he said. "The firm I consult for. They want me to push you, say yes or lose access." I let that sit. "So that's it?" I asked. "You're choosing them?" His silence was answer enough. That night, I walked alone through the fogged streets, coat clutched tight, boots echoing against wet cobblestones. Power was supposed to protect me, but it only changed the rules of who was allowed to betray me. And then I saw a name. Hidden in the footer of one of the investment proposals was a shell company, familiar but distant. I traced it. Within hours, Logan's silence made sense. The lead investor was a man named Julian Hart. He'd once been my mentor, the first person who told me I had instincts sharper than any resume, the same man who encouraged me to leave the corporate world and build something only you could own. And now he was trying to buy it from under me. I requested a meeting. He agreed without hesitation. He arrived late. No apologies, just swagger and silk and a gaze too familiar to ignore. "I always knew you'd be brilliant," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "You just needed enough fire to burn the girl out of you." I didn't reply. He leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Look, Claire, you built a symbol. That's what people buy now, symbols, movements. But symbols don't run companies. Systems do, and I have systems." "And what do you want?" I asked. "To help you evolve," he said. "You can stay on the board. We'll rebrand you. Controlled exposure. Maybe a limited edition product line. We keep the myth alive, but we steer the ship." He smiled. "You'll be the queen, but we'll keep the board in check." It took me a moment to realize he wasn't offering me power. He was offering me a crown in a kingdom he already owned. I folded the contract once, then again. "I didn't set fire to my life to let another man hand me the ashes." Julian sighed, as if I'd disappointed him, as if I'd missed a lesson. "You think you're free, Claire," he said. "But no one's free, not really. We just get better at choosing who holds the leash." I stood up. "Then maybe I'm done being a dog." I left without shaking his hand. Somewhere in the distance, I could already hear the machinery of retaliation whirring to life. But I didn't care. I'd walked through fire before. Now, I knew how to build with it. I always thought the most terrifying moment would be the collapse. The instant everything I built crumbled in front of me, brick by brick, as vultures circled with contracts and lawsuits in hand. But when it came, it wasn't terrifying. It was relief. I dissolved Ember's skin, not with scandal, but with clarity. No headlines, no crisis. I issued a single statement. Legacy isn't built by holding on, it's built by letting go. The industry lost its mind. Blogs speculated mental breakdowns. Analysts guessed mergers. Influencers mourned the brand like a fallen monarch. But none of them knew the truth. I didn't walk away because I was defeated. I walked away because I won. And I knew the price of staying. I transferred the technology, the formulas, and all operational infrastructure to a small, all-female startup based in rural Montana. Women who had been creating natural skincare for their community with almost no funding, no reach. I gave it to them for $1. The lawyers called me insane. I called it penance, or maybe resurrection. Next came the book. I didn't pitch it. I didn't sign with a publisher. I wrote it in longhand in notebooks filled with crossings out and ink smears. No names, no brands. Just a woman who entered a castle and realized she'd been mistaken for a servant. A woman who chose fire over fear, who didn't just escape the system, but dismantled it. I published it anonymously through an indie press with no social media, no endorsements, no ads. Within weeks, the book caught flame. Readers passed it hand to hand, quoting it in blog posts, reading it aloud at book clubs. The player's wife, they called it. They thought it was fiction. When the film rights sold, I said nothing. They cast a rising actress with intelligent eyes and a quiet voice. She didn't look like me. She looked like the version of me I'd always wanted to become. The film became a cult hit, a quiet revolution, and no one knew it was mine. I watched the premiere from a small cafe in the south of France, sipping coffee beside a flower stall, and no one noticed me. It was perfect. The days moved gently after that. I walked more, read slower, listened harder. I didn't answer calls from former associates. I didn't check the markets. I didn't miss my old life. Not the power, not the status, not even the revenge. I had outgrown it all. One afternoon, I sat at a sunlit corner table in a small bookshop cafe, flipping through a French translation of The Player's Wife. 3 university students sat nearby, deep in animated debate. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but their voices carried. "She changed inheritance laws in 3 countries," one said, excitement in her voice. "There's a clause named after her now." "She never even gave her name," another chimed in. "That's the brilliance of it. She made herself invisible so the story could belong to everyone." A third added, "I heard the real woman disappeared, went into exile." They laughed. guessing cities, identities, motives. I turned a page. Then one of them glanced over at me. "You've read it?" she asked, gesturing to the book in my hands. I looked up and nodded. "More than once." "Do you think it's real?" she asked. I paused, then smiled. "I think. Sometimes stories don't need to be real to be true." They nodded, satisfied. The conversation drifted elsewhere. I finished my coffee, paid in cash, and left a tip beside the saucer. Before leaving, I placed something on the table behind me, a small leather notebook, worn edges, unmarked except for one line embossed in gold on the cover. To every woman who was treated like a pawn, become the player. As I walked out into the late afternoon sun, I didn't look back, not because I didn't care, but because I had finally learned the most powerful move in the game, knowing when to step away from the board.